In 1998, Wesley Snipes made the first Marvel movie that actually worked, Blade, a decade before the superhero era officially started. 12 years later, the same man was an actual inmate, doing 3 years in a federal prison. Between those 2 points, the most versatile run any action star ever put together. Drug lord, drag queen, jazz musician, vampire hunter, same guy, 1 decade. So we're ranking every Wesley Snipes movie of the 90s, worst to best. Let's get into it. 14. Boiling Point, 1993. At the bottom is a movie almost nobody remembers, which is strange because look at the poster. Snipes, Dennis Hopper, and it still lands with a thud. Boiling Point wants to be a slow-burn crime drama. Snipes plays a treasury agent hunting the con man who killed his partner. Hopper's the aging grifter on one last run. On paper, that's a movie. In practice, it can't decide what it is. Half character study, half thriller, committed to neither. Here's the thing though, and it matters for where we're going. Even in a movie this flat, watch Snipes. He's doing actual work, quiet, controlled, playing a man too tired to be angry. He's better than the film around him. Keep that in your back pocket, because you're going to see it over and over on this list. Snipes turning in more than the material deserves. That's the whole story of the decade right there. 13. Money Train, 1995. This one should have printed money. Reunite the 2 guys from White Men Can't Jump. Snipes and Woody Harrelson, foster brothers, both transit cops, plotting to rob the New York subway's cash train. Throw in a young Jennifer Lopez before anyone knew the name. Action comedy, built-in chemistry, holiday release. Can't miss. It missed. And that's the Woody thread. First appearance. Hold on to it, because these 2 made a habit of showing up together, and it did not always go like this. Money Train is loud and busy, and never finds the easy, needling rhythm that made White Men Can't Jump sing. The chemistry's still there in flashes. The movie just keeps stepping on it. There's a real-world footnote too. After some copycat subway attacks made the news, the movie caught a wave of blame it mostly didn't earn. Either way, good cast, wrong movie. 12. The Fan, 1996. Tony Scott directs. Robert De Niro stars. And Wesley Snipes is the other lead, which tells you something about where he was in 1996. You don't get billed opposite De Niro in a Tony Scott movie unless you're a genuine draw. Snipes plays Bobby Rayburn, a superstar baseball player being stalked by De Niro's obsessive, unraveling fan. And here's the part that got me on the rewatch. Snipes plays against everything you'd expect. He's not the action hero here. He's a rich, insulated, slightly checked-out athlete, a guy coasting on talent. It's a subtle, unshowy performance in a movie that's mostly interested in De Niro coming apart. The film's overheated in that glossy 90s thriller way, and it doesn't fully work. But watch what Snipes is doing with restraint, and file it next to Boiling Point. Twice now, he's the calm center of a movie that's louder than it is good. 11. Drop Zone, 1994. Now we get to the pure, uncut 90s action, and honestly, this one's a good time. Drop Zone is Snipes as a U.S. Marshal who has to learn to skydive to take down a crew of criminal parachutists led by Gary Busey. And yes, that sentence is exactly as gloriously stupid as it sounds. This is a movie about jumping out of planes, so they jumped out of a lot of planes. Here's the detail I love. This is the era we keep coming back to on this channel, the no CGI safety net era. A ton of the skydiving in this movie is real people actually skydiving, because in 1994, that's just how you got the shot. The stunt team did over 100 jumps. You can feel it. There's a weight to it that a green screen version never has. It's not deep. It doesn't try to be. But it moves. Busey's having a blast being unhinged, and Snipes sells a guy learning to be brave in real time. 10. Sugar Hill, 1994. This movie is a Harlem crime drama, and it's basically Snipes' Godfather audition. He plays Romello, a drug dealer who desperately wants out of the life, held in by loyalty to his volatile brother and the gravity of everything he's already done. It's slow, it's operatic, it's sad, and Snipes is quietly devastating in it. Watch what he does with stillness here. Nino Brown in New Jack City, which we'll get to, is all heat and swagger, a performance that fills the room. Romello is the opposite. He's a man who's already tired of his own life, playing every scene with this weight of somebody who knows exactly how the story ends and can't figure out how to step off the track. There's a scene where he just sits, listening, and you can see 3 different regrets moving behind his eyes. That's not action star acting. That's the real thing. This is the range thread getting serious. Same year as Drop Zone, a movie built around skydiving jokes. He's also doing this. Interior, mournful, playing a man drowning in his own choices. 2 completely different actors, 1 calendar year. And I think that's exactly why Sugar Hill got overlooked at the time. Audiences wanted the guy from Passenger 57, and instead they got a somber character study. It was the wrong movie for the moment. It plays a lot better now when you can see it for what it is. If you only know Snipes as the guy who kicks people, Sugar Hill is the one to fix that. 9. Rising Sun, 1993, Snipes and Sean Connery, buddy detective murder mystery. That's the pitch, and the pitch mostly delivers. Rising Sun drops the 2 of them into a killing inside a Japanese corporation in LA, with Connery as the world-weary expert who actually understands the culture, and Snipes as the sharp younger detective learning on the fly. The mystery's a little convoluted, and some of the film's politics have aged into a real conversation. But the reason to watch is the 2 leads, and here's what got me. Snipes holds the screen next to Sean Connery. That is not a small thing. This is peak Connery, a few years after his Oscar, an actor with enough gravity to steamroll a co-star just by standing there. Plenty of good actors got flattened next to him. Snipes doesn't. He matches him beat for beat, never overplays it, lets Connery be the legend while quietly running his own game underneath. The sharp, modern one to Connery's old-world cool. The 2 of them have a genuine rhythm, a real double act, and Snipes never once looks like the junior partner. Think about the confidence that takes. In 1993, he'd been a leading man for about 2 years, and he's going toe-to-toe with James Bond himself like it's nothing. That self-assurance is the same quality that let him play a villain the size of Simon Phoenix and a drama that won him Venice. A guy who simply never seemed intimidated by anything the job threw at him. 8. One Night Stand, 1997. Okay, stop. Because this is the one nobody expects on a Wesley Snipes list, and it's the biggest data point in the whole range argument. One Night Stand is a Mike Figgis relationship drama. No action, no franchise, no stunts. Snipes plays a married ad director whose life quietly detonates after a single unplanned night with a woman he meets by chance. It's adult, it's melancholy, it's about guilt and time and the lives we don't live. And Snipes won Best Actor at the Venice Film Festival for it. The Volpi Cup, one of the oldest, most serious acting prizes on the planet. The same award that's gone to some of the greatest performances in film history. Wesley Snipes has one. For a drama, most of his action fans have never even heard of. Think about that against everything else on this list. This is the guy who, 1 year later, would be hunting vampires in leather. Sound familiar? It shouldn't, because nobody else could do both. 7. U.S. Marshals, 1998. The big budget one, the sequel nobody asked for that turned out to be pretty great. U.S. Marshals is basically The Fugitive without Harrison Ford. Tommy Lee Jones is back as the relentless Marshal Sam Gerard, and this time, the man on the run is Snipes, playing a fugitive accused of a double murder who is very obviously hiding something. A young Robert Downey Jr. is in the mix too. Here's the structural trick, and it's why the movie works. Snipes barely speaks for the first act. He plays the whole thing physical, watchful, coiled, communicating a man's entire desperation through how he moves. It's a movie star trusting that his presence alone will carry a lead role with almost no dialogue. And it does. You're locked to him even when you don't know whose side he's on. It's a slick, satisfying, grown-up thriller, and it proved Snipes could anchor a studio tentpole opposite an Oscar winner. 6. Passenger 57, 1993. Always bet on black. If you're a certain age, you just heard his voice say it. Passenger 57 is the movie that turned Wesley Snipes, dramatic actor, into Wesley Snipes, action star. And it did it in about 84 lean minutes. The setup is Die Hard on a plane. Years before anyone said Die Hard on a plane was a genre, Snipes is an airline security expert who happens to be aboard the exact flight a charismatic terrorist hijacks. What makes it work is that Snipes doesn't play it like a musclehead. He plays it smart, A guy thinking 2 moves ahead, using his hands only when the thinking runs out. The martial arts, by the way, are his. This is the for real thread getting louder. Snipes had been training since he was 12, a legitimate 5th-degree black belt in Shotokan karate, and you can see it in how clean and fast the fight work is. No stunt double fog, no cutting away every half second to hide a double. The camera can actually stay on him because he can actually do it. In an era when most action stars were being assembled in the edit, that was a genuine weapon. And here's why this one matters more than its runtime suggests. Before Passenger 57, Snipes was a respected dramatic actor. The guy from New Jack City and Jungle Fever, a Spike Lee guy, an actor's actor. This is the movie that added a second career on top of the first one. After this, he could open an action movie and win an acting prize. And he spent the rest of the decade doing exactly that, bouncing between the two like it was nothing. Most people have to pick a lane. Passenger 57 is the moment Snipes decided he'd drive in both. It's tight, it's cool, it's endlessly quotable. 5. White Men Can't Jump, 1992. The most fun movie on this entire list. Woody Thread, second appearance. And this is the one that worked so well they kept trying to recapture it. Snipes and Harrelson as basketball hustlers running con games on the blacktop courts of LA, talking more trash than any 2 humans in film history. Ron Shelton wrote it with a real ear, and the 2 of them just cook. Here's what makes it more than a sports comedy, and it's a range beat. Snipes plays Sydney as a whole person. He's the fast-talking hustler, sure, but he's also a husband, a father, a guy trying to claw his family into a better zip code, and every bit of that is under the swagger. The comedy's effortless. The heart underneath it is real. That's a hard combination, and he makes it look like nothing. It's aged beautifully. Put it on tonight, and it plays like it came out last year. 4. Demolition Man, 1993. Snipes at his most gleefully, cartoonishly unleashed. Demolition Man is a sci-fi action blast. Sylvester Stallone is a cop thawed out of cryo prison in a sterile, sanitized future to catch the one criminal insane enough to survive it, Simon Phoenix. And Snipes as Phoenix is having the time of his life. Bleached flat top, neon menace, a live wire in every single scene. He is, flat out, one of the great 90s action villains. And here's the part that got me lining it up for this video. This is 1993. Snipes is playing a comic book-sized villain. The exaggerated colors, the theatrical evil, the whole heightened register. 5 full years before he'd walk into a real comic book movie and change the business. He was doing superhero movie energy before superhero movies existed. He just aimed it at villainy first. Stallone's the hero. But everybody remembers Phoenix. 3. To Wong Fu, Thanks for Everything, Julie Newmar, 1995. The single bravest choice on the whole list in my humble opinion, and it's the range thread's finest hour. In 1995, at the absolute peak of his action star run, right after playing a drug lord, a marshal, and a cyber villain, Wesley Snipes put on heels, a wig, and full glamour to play Noxeema Jackson, a drag queen on a cross-country road trip, alongside Patrick Swayze and John Leguizamo, 2 of the biggest, most macho leading men of the era, in a comedy about kindness and identity, and being yourself out loud. Think about the guts that took in 1995. There was no upside for an action star's image. He did it anyway, and he's wonderful in it. Warm, funny, completely committed, not a wink of embarrassment anywhere. It's the movie that proves the range wasn't a fluke. This is a man who could play anything and simply wasn't scared of any of it. That fearlessness is the through line of his entire decade, and it's exactly why the top 2 hit like they do. 2. New Jack City, 1991. The one that started it all. The one that turned a promising young actor into a star overnight. New Jack City is the movie where Wesley Snipes plays Nino Brown, the drug kingpin building a crack empire out of a fortress apartment complex in early 90s New York. And he is magnetic, charismatic, terrifying, seductive, monstrous, sometimes all at once. It's the kind of villain performance that reorganizes a career. You root for him a little even as you're horrified by him, and that tension is entirely Snipes. Here's the part that got me going back through this one. Nino Brown could so easily have been a cartoon, a scowling one-note bad guy. Snipes refuses to let him be. He plays Nino as charming, first and foremost. Funny, stylish. A guy you'd want at your table right up until the second he has someone killed without changing his expression. There's that infamous courtroom scene where the whole performance turns on a dime, and you watch a man who's controlled every room he's ever been in finally lose the plot. It's a big, operatic, fearless piece of acting from a guy who was, at that point, basically a newcomer in a lead role. He plays it like he already knows he belongs there. And here's the range thread landing its heaviest blow. Nino Brown is a genuinely great dramatic performance. Serious, dangerous work. The kind of role that in another lane gets you awards buzz. And it came out the same year as his part in Spike Lee's Jungle Fever, where he played a crack addict in a performance so raw, it reportedly helped inspire an entire subplot. Two 1991 movies. Two completely different men, both unforgettable. That's the year Wesley Snipes announced he was going to be one of the defining actors of the decade, in any genre he wanted. The film itself mattered too. It was one of the defining movies of the early 90s new wave of Black American cinema, a cultural event, not just a crime flick. And it all runs on Snipes. Everything we've ranked flows out of this performance. It's his origin story. New Jack City would be #1 on almost any other actor's list, but not this one. Because there's one movie that didn't just define his career, it redefined everybody's. Blade, 1998. No surprises here, right? Here's the situation in 1998. Comic book movies were a joke. Batman and Robin had just detonated the whole genre a year earlier. Neon, nipples on the batsuit, a punchline. The idea of a serious, cool, R-rated Marvel movie didn't exist. Marvel was bankrupt. Nobody in Hollywood believed a Marvel character could carry a real film. And then Wesley Snipes played Blade, the half-vampire, half-human vampire hunter, and made it stylish, brutal, and genuinely cool. The martial arts thread pays off in full right here. That opening blood rave fight, the katana work, the way he moves, that's a legitimate black belt at the peak of his physicality, and it looks like nothing else in 1998. He plays Blade with this contained, glowering, unbothered menace that basically invents the modern superhero movie attitude on the spot. And here's what actually happened next, and it's the part most people don't connect. Blade was a hit, a real one. It proved a Marvel property could make money and be taken seriously. And 2 years later, that greenlit X-Men, which greenlit Spider-Man, which became the entire architecture of the modern box office. Every Marvel movie you have ever seen is standing on a foundation Wesley Snipes poured in 1998. He was first. He was the proof of concept for a $100 billion idea. That's why it's #1. Not because it's his coolest movie, though it is, but rather because it's the most important. The most versatile actor of the 90s closed the decade by quietly inventing the genre that would run the next 30 years. So here's where it all lands, and it's honestly a little heavy. The man who did all of this, the drug lord, the drag queen, the Venice Best Actor Prize, the movie that built modern Hollywood, spent the back half of the 2000s fighting the tax case that eventually put him away. And I want to be fair about this, because the internet usually isn't. Snipes was acquitted of every serious fraud charge. What actually happened is he bought into a bogus theory, pushed by some genuinely bad faith people, that the income tax somehow didn't legally apply to him, and he stopped filing. A jury cleared him of the big stuff and convicted him only on failing to file. He got the maximum anyway, 3 years, largely to make an example of him. He served about 28 months and walked out in 2013. It's a sad footnote to a spectacular decade, but here's the grace note I'll leave you with. In 2024, 30 years after all of this, Snipes pulled the sword back out. He returned as Blade in Deadpool and Wolverine, the crowd lost its mind, and he walked away with a Guinness World Record for the longest career as a live-action Marvel character. The proof of concept got his flowers after all. So now I want to hear from you. Which one did I rank too low? Is Passenger 57 higher than 6 on your list? Does Sugar Hill deserve a spot in the top 5? And be honest, before this video, did you know the man had a Best Actor prize from Venice sitting on a shelf? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. That's it from the booth. Go thread one of these back up tonight. Start with New Jack City, work your way to Blade, and try to believe it's the same guy. This has been Victor, at Picture Recall. Lights up.